Thanks everyone who has joined and those who will attend and view our recording later. This is the Cybersecurity Magazine webinar. This is the first one we are organizing, and we thought what's the best thing to start with, and that's the emerging technologies area. And that's of most interest to everyone. Technology is moving at a very fast pace today, and we picked up. Quantum computing, of course, and Ahmed is there, and cloud computing, if you want to say, and that's where Tim is also there. And of course, with that, you have the connectivity part, and I'll try to cover the connectivity 5G part, more of a private network aspect. And all of this is obviously security. It's Cybersecurity Magazine. As a background, Cybersecurity Magazine, we started now more than 10 years back actually, with a different name back then. It was Opinion Pieces in Cybersecurity, and the idea being to bring security awareness to everyone. So we have been publishing articles, newsletters, and profiles of people and things like that. And now the webinar for the first time. And we hope to continue with this. And also, of course, podcasts and stuff like that. So people have shown interest and that's going in this path. Let me do one thing. Instead of introducing Tim and Ahmed separately before their talk, let me introduce them now itself, and then I'll call them. We'll have presentations by each one of us, 10 minutes each, and then a few question answer. So Tim will be the first one going. So let me introduce Tim. So Tim is currently a principal cybersecurity strategist at Google. And he has a 30 plus years experience in cybersecurity. That's quite a long time. If I remember, Tim, back then it was not called cybersecurity, it was just security actually. and cloud computing came over, and then you have worked in defense, cloud computing, and finance, and many different areas. With the top 100 Fortune companies. And also I see a US Navy related and have achieved several different awards. Yeah. And I see, Tim, you have a black belt in Aikido. So second dan, yeah.
I do. That's so, the certificates behind my head that probably can barely see.
Well, someone might zoom in there. And that's welcoming Tim that way, and we'll come to his talk, of course, later. And with amazing career out there, including CISO and many hands-on experiences as well. And then Ahmed Banafa, Professor Ahmed Banafa, I should say, San Jose State University and Stanford University, and I'm pretty sure if you are active in social media or in today's world in general, you have heard and seen Ahmed's face and name for sure in everywhere on many different topics. Really appreciate that, Ahmed, as well. And instead of reading out all the stuff, Ahmed, if people have seen, at least I have seen, so I'll not read what is in front of me. I've seen your books on IoT, quantum, AI, and all these different aspects. And today you're helping us discuss about quantum computing and security aspects. Ahmed has been in all those key places. San Jose State University I mentioned, Stanford I mentioned, and I see Harvard and MIT as well. So thanks both of you for being here. I will. Oh, let me introduce myself as well. I don't have 30 plus, but I very close to that actually, team experience in my life as well. I've been doing cybersecurity or security back then, and focusing on Wi-Fi, 3G when it came, 4G and 5G as well, where I was chairman of the standards body, and then led the operators in deploying mobile networks, securing them. And now since 2 years in Deloitte in Japan. Yeah. With that introduction, and already eating up quite a bit of time with that, but I think that's important. Allow me to request Tim to start his presentation on cloud computing aspects. Tim, please.
You bet. Let me know when you can see it.
Yes, it's visible, Tim. Thank you.
Perfect. And thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. And those of you that are able to join us, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule today. as Anand mentioned, my name's Tim Manley. I work at Google. I'm what we call a principal cybersecurity strategist. And what I do is I help customers and companies focus on adoption, particularly of the cloud on the cybersecurity side, which is very important, as people do their transformations. I'm going to delve into what I think are some really groundbreaking developments in cybersecurity and cloud. But given our tight schedule, I have about 10 minutes to cut through this. So I'm not going to be able to go really, really in depth, but we do have a question and answer at the end. So I'll be taking questions toward the end of the, and after everybody's presentations have completed. So first I'll go ahead and move into kind of why we're having these discussions. I don't think for this crowd, I probably have to dive too deep into it, but I think we're really into what I call a kind of perfect cybersecurity storm. And perfect is not the best means, right? It's more of a negative. We really have to rethink and disrupt how we're doing security. I mean, our traditional bolt-on security just has not worked, right? And it hasn't worked for a couple of reasons. One, we have, historically, we started out, when I started out 30 years ago, we had maybe very, worst case we dealt with was malware, right? Boot sector viruses, very minor things, more of annoyance than anything. But now we've seen it transition, right? Where now you have actors, and those actors are gray between nation state or ransomware actors, and sometimes they're the same, sometimes they overlap. And we're seeing more and more nation states now having a focus on regular companies, and it doesn't matter the size of your company. If they're looking to get particular information, whether it's an espionage or even denial of service, they do it. And you'd be surprised some of the companies they actually target in those type of attacks, and the information that they think, that they could use. Number two, our environments are getting complex, right? I mean, we have new attack surfaces. The clouds came in, we have containers, we have IoT, we have remote work, we have a legacy. We have a lot of legacy environment that's out there, and that stuff's hard to really, really secure. So how do we do it? And then on top of that, as the other presenters are going to talk about, we have the convergence of mobile network technology that's coming out and the speed that it has, and then quantum computing, which completely changes the dynamics of how we're going to secure and what kind of, how we secure and the methods that we do it, right? And then the very last pillar, we got a cybersecurity shortage, and I don't see it improving overnight, right? Our adversaries are outpacing us, which makes it a little more complicated. So how do we leverage technology to enable the new workforce that's coming in, and how do we move from bolt-on security to secure by design? So here's what I think are for me personally, probably the top 4 most interesting security technologies that are emerging today, right? And I think that's going to help us stay ahead of the potential threats. One of those is passkeys, and I'm going to dive a lot deeper into this, but it's moving away from password authentication, moving towards more biometric authentication. It makes it easier to use for end users, number one. And number two, it makes it much harder to phish or steal those credentials. The other one is cloud native security analytics, right? And some people can call it next generation SIEM. But what it is we have so much telemetry that's coming out of the cloud and 5G, IoT, you name it. There's a ton of telemetry that's coming out, and our legacy SIEM environments or even data platforms just can't support that scale. So this is one area I think that's quite interesting. The other one is what we call attack path simulation. So that is, it's a tool that allows our security defenders to simulate how a real world attacker may target a cloud environment. And it helps you visualize where they could enter and what steps they could take and what systems that they could pivot to actually get full compromise of your cloud environment or your data. And then the very last one is we've all heard about AI, right? But we haven't talked about how we secure AI. So there's some discussion in the industry on one is called Secure AI Framework, and it's basically to help companies as we're trying to roll out different AI systems, that we are able to make sure that we have the appropriate controls to make sure that that AI is also secure. So I think those are the 4 ones that quite interest me enough. I'm going to dive into each one of those a lot deeper. Let's go ahead and move on. So number 1 on my list, passwordless login with passkeys. I'm sure some people here probably thinking, what exactly is a passkey? Well, what it is, it's a collaboration initially started out between Apple and Google, because they hold most of the mobile devices, right? And they leveraged the FIDO Alliance and WC3 standards to come up with a cryptographic key pairs, basically, that allows authentication using the biometrics from mobile devices. And the reason they did it is, number 1, it just simply makes it more user-friendly, right? Makes it a much better experience. And then also, it makes it phishing resistant, right? It makes it much harder for those adversaries to get access to credentials, because there aren't credentials. There's just simply key pairs that are shared between the device and the web app or the application. So there's, I think, a couple benefits as we see that this technology is coming out. You're going to start seeing, if you haven't already, a lot of the major tech rolling this out. One, obviously, as mentioned, the user experience, right? We don't have to remember passwords. We can just focus on, our PIN of our phone or fingerprints or our face, right? And it's something that we do every day, so the learning curve is not hard. Security, right? Since it's using FIDO authentication, we know that that's proven to be resistant against the phishing and credential stuffing and remote attacks. Our service providers then can start using this as an alternative, to login, so that you don't have to. You basically can register with this passkey, and that's it. And then scalability. Historically, when you would have other like FIDO credentials, et cetera, you had to register for each and every service, for each and every device. With this, it actually replicates between those. So if you have a device, and let's say your mobile device needs to get replaced, which it does every few years, you don't have to reset it back up again. It automatically replicates to it. So I think, in kind of conclusion on this one, look forward to seeing it coming out. I would strongly say leverage it if you're in a development role, because it is simply going to make life a lot easier, and I think a lot more secure for all of us. It's going to be a lot more pervasive, and I think it's going to really have a revolutionary drive to help us, how we're going to authenticate to online services in the future. So then moving to the second one, I think is disruptive. It's not really new. I mean, like I mentioned, we've had SIMs and data lakes, security data lakes, for years, right? Pretty much almost from the beginning when I started my career, shortly thereafter. But those were really developed not for the scale, right? We had to make a lot of decisions about how much data we're going to store, not just how much data we're going to store, but how much it's going to cost us, right? We have to buy new drive storage, we have to lease new storage, whatever that might be. And it caused us a lot of blind spots in our security event monitoring. And with the adversaries that we're dealing with today, particularly in nation states or some of the more professional adversaries, they're quite elusive to detect. So every one of those logs, whether it was like DNS logs, historically were just huge. Now we can actually start to store those. And we can see it almost at I'd say a petabyte scale. I mean, scales that was unheard of, just a few years ago. So it brings a couple of advantages. As I mentioned, obviously scalability. The other one I mentioned was visibility, right? Where you can start to now you can see the cloud logs, you can see the network traffic, right? And with that, when you start to collect that amount of telemetry, now with AI that's coming out, we can leverage AI to then use it to detect patterns in that telemetry that otherwise we would never have been able to detect, because historically we've relied on signatures, right? Certain type of, or maybe some type of machine learning, but most of those were, I would say, not fully effective. And I think we can see that from the success of some of the adversaries that's been out there. The next one is, once we start to build that, you can start to have automated response. And I don't know if you can do automated response for everything, but some of that low-hanging, repeatable commodity type of attacks, you can very quickly react to that adversary and stop the attack early on rather than much later, right? So if we can automate as much as we can. And the very last one is cloud native integration, right? It's no longer do you have to, stand up a log collector and, forward the logs, and you have to have network traffic and bandwidth. Now with cloud native integration, you just have an API key and you can point it to it and it can start to ingest it immediately. So it makes it much, much easier. You don't have to put so much effort and workload and investment into onboarding. So my belief is we're going to start seeing this more and more. It's going to help us drive some of the mitigation strategies and help detect and then respond to those. So, next, actually it's out today, but I think we're seeing it more and more pervasive just because as the cloud providers are coming out, it's very critical that it's secure by design. And that part of that secure by design is coming with this kind of technology. Number 3rd on my list, and I apologize if I'm talking a little fast because I do want to fit all of this in there, is attack path simulation, right? And so, as I mentioned, cloud environments are continuing to scale and evolve, right? And, I think the learning curve is a lot of people move from on-prem to the cloud is the learning curve is kind of high for a lot of people, and the controls are a little different. So this helps them, or helps individuals kind of detect the areas where the greatest risk is to their business, and then help concentrate, where you focus your time and energy and investment into putting security measures in place to mitigate the possibility of that attack. And this is where attack path simulation comes in, because what it does is it basically helps you pinpoint the most plausible routes of attack, and then to basically your valuable assets. And that could be your customer data, that could be your IP, that could be your user accounts, right? Could be all of those. And then help you prioritize where you focus. So this technique, what it does is it emulates potential attack strategies based on real-world adversaries. So we know that there's certain techniques that are used very commonly at certain devices. And so it evaluates those against all of the assets in your environment, all of your interconnects, and all of your security measures. So if you have certain systems that have vulnerabilities, which sometimes do exist, we have to be really, sometimes we can't patch it, right? But if we can mitigate it, we can see where all of the pathways to those assets go, particularly like open firewall ports and public IPs and commute scenarios, right? So that we can look at it from basically a scenario-based risk assessment, and then navigate to see where they could get unauthorized access to that asset. Now, these are really helpful and instrumental in identifying and mapping the most vulnerable attack paths, as I mentioned. So I think that as we have a lot of new, new joiners coming into cybersecurity, and it takes a lot, right? It's security so broad. This is one of those technologies that can help enable them to have knowledge and understanding, and particularly from an adversary perspective, that they can then use to then defend their environment. And last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, AI, it's hands down, it's one of the most transformative technologies I think we've seen in my time, to be honest with you. And it's going to revolutionize clearly multiple industries, and also how we do security, both offensive and defensive, right? So securing AI, we talk a lot about the capabilities of AI, but we haven't talked a lot about securing AI, right? Because it's got new threat vectors that can be exploited by adversaries. And AI systems are very complex. They're not simple, right? Because of the technology they use. And they also do have vulnerabilities that can be exploited. For example, AI systems can be definitely vulnerable to import validation errors, or other examples that we've seen that even use today against our current technology. And so this is where we call the Secure AI Framework, or SAIF, is coming out. So those of you that are involved in AI, I would strongly suggest take a look at this and leverage it. It helps basically strengthen your existing security protocols so you can kind of address some of those risks and challenges. And it includes covering from threat detection and response. Just like any other system that we have out there today, we need to integrate that into our defense, right? Into our defense tooling, into our defense processes, right? And then tune it. It's got to have that constant feedback. You know, as the technology becomes even more and more prevalent, you know, we're all going to have lessons learned in this industry of certain attacks are successful, and then make sure that we're learning from those and we're helping, you know, reduce those risks. So I think we're at a key moment of our AI journey, and these breakthroughs in generative AI are just fundamentally changing how we are going to do our jobs in the future. So, you know, we as security professionals really have to use the technology, but we also make sure that we're doing the right thing to defend it. So with that said, you know, this concludes my presentation. I hope it's provided you with a little bit of insight. Again, I know I moved through some of this stuff really quickly. Happy to take questions after the other presentations are done, or if you want to reach out offline, I'm more than happy to have conversations on those. So I'll hand it back to Anand, and thank you all for your time, and I look forward to the panel.
Thanks, Tim. Great points there, very practical. Passing on to Ahmed, we go to quantum computing now.
You want to stop the sharing?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Let me get thing done.
Yes, we can see your slides now.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Welcome everyone to the presentation about the crossroad between quantum computing and cybersecurity. Can you guys hear me good?
I can hear you well, Ahmed.
Okay, that's good. Fantastic. Let me just get this here. Okay. So let me start with a few things about quantum computing first, because I don't want to assume that everybody you know, have you know, a deep knowledge about quantum computing, given that it's been there for years, but the real movement is actually starting these years, especially with Google and with IBM, and you know, big names are really dipping their toes in this kind of technology. But before I do that, I usually have questions from my student about what are the hot trends of technology, 2023, 2024, whatever is we talking about it. And thank to Tim for mentioning, you know, all of them. It's actually that's true. The first you talk about Internet of Things, and then you talk about blockchain technology. AI, with the year of 2023 is the year of AI, and then cybersecurity. All of them are really a driving force, hot trend for technology, but they are actually vulnerable for what, you know, to deal with one thing, which is quantum computing. Because we look at the IoT, or the Internet of Things, the security of the devices, and I usually look at the Internet of Things as 4 components: the sensor, the network, the cloud, and the application, and each one of them will have its own security nightmare. So, and the blockchain using the SHA-256 as the hashing or the encryption technique, the AI, and how can we secure the AI, and Tim touched on that in a very nice way, and then cybersecurity in general. Quantum computing can just destroy that easily, given the fact that when we talk about quantum computing, you have to keep in mind, and I teach a class about quantum computing at my school, whenever I talk about quantum computing, you should think about speed. That's everything has to will be done so fast. The example I give it to the student the first day of class to understand the difference between classical computers and quantum computers is the following. Imagine you are in a maze and you're trying to get out of that maze. And you have a door after a door. You open this door, will take you to the next hallway, and then you open the door and it's a dead end. You try to find your way. If you are using classical computer to find your way outside of this maze, it's going to be door after door. You open this, then you go to the next one. If we are using quantum computing, all the doors will be open at the same time. So you'll find you can leave in no time. So that is how you can think about quantum computing as the driving force and the risk for all the technologies mentioned here. And it's not like something that still, in the labs or in the research papers. There is a lot of companies are dealing with quantum computing, and there are different parts of that, from the encryption to the hardware to the software to the AI to the building the computers itself, the quantum computing, using different technologies, optical quantum computing, cloud, quantum computing, quantum circuits. All of this there are companies working in this. You probably, some of them you know about them, heard about them, like the D-Wave and the Rigidity, and and the one that's supported by the IonQ one by Samsung, and also the same thing with Google doing their research on this. The rise of the quantum computing companies is notable, and we have a big spike in 2019 because of the announcement of Google about the quantum supremacy. And the quantum supremacy simply is they showed that a computation can be done in 10,000 years with classical computers. They proved that can be done in 300 seconds using the computer they have, which is 53 qubit. I'm going to talk about the qubit also in more details. So the basis for the quantum computing is the quantum theory, and the quantum theory is part of the quantum physics. We have two words of physics, which one, the classical physics, Isaac Newton, everything is time is fixed, rules are there, and if I drop a pen, it's going to go down, all of those fixed rules. And we have the quantum world, which is the rules are different. And I tell my student when I go to that class, I tell them you have to put your brain on hold, because we're going to talk about things that make no sense to you, but they are reality because you are thinking in classical, computer for classical physics. We're talking about quantum physics. And a lot of countries and companies spending money on quantum computing. We're talking about almost $24 billion spent on the quantum research in 2021. Now, there are two principles of quantum computing, and this is where I lose my students when I start talking about it: the superposition and entanglement. Superposition is being in different places at the same time. You see it in the movies all the time. This is how I explain it to everybody. If you ask where is Professor Banafa, Professor Banafa is 20% in this room, 50% that room, 70% in that room. So it's percentage. Once you go to that room and you find him, the others will collapse. So the superposition, you can be in multiple positions at the same time. And that's one of the major principles of quantum computing, which is you're going to see that's going to help us in understanding how that's going to impact cybersecurity. The other one is entanglement, which is a crazy concept. Albert Einstein called this one a spooky action from distance. If two photons or electrons cross their path, particles basically, they cross their path, they are entangled. That means they are connected forever until they cross the path of some another particles, regardless of the distance. So speed of light means nothing. They could be in the other side of the universe, and if one of them will spin right, the other one will spin left. So they're going to go to the different side, and this is very helpful. Now, I think all of you think about it. If I can manage this kind of connectivity, entanglement, I can create a communication, and this is the basis for the internet, the quantum internet, and this is the basis for the quantum cryptography that we'll talk about. How can you use this kind of principles of quantum computing? Let's talk about superposition. Superposition is the basic building block for the computers now is the binary system, where you have 0 and 1. So the bit will have a 0 or 1, on and off. In the case of quantum computing, you can have all of them at the same time, meaning you could be 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1 at the same time. So you could present all the options at the same time. Remember the example I gave you about the maze. You could open all the doors at the same time, not just one door at a time. And that is the driving force and making it faster, because you could do 4 things at the same time instead of doing 1. And this is coming from the case of superposition. And this example is really going to make it easier for anybody who like numbers. So the scale 500 quabit. A quabit is another name for the bit, but using the quantum in front of it. Represent the same information of 2 to the power of 500. And while in the typical computers, you need millions of years to find all the prime factors of the 2048-bit number, which is the one that's used for the RSA, the latest encryption for the internet. So with a quantum computer, you can break a lot of existing encryption that we have on the internet. Now, the difficulties with the quantum computer, why cannot go to Best Buy and buy a quantum computer? Why it's not available for us? There's tons of things that between getting to that point where it's a stable box, I can take it home, I can use it, also the number of the qubit and the type of the qubit has a big impact. Interferences is very fragile when it comes to any kind of electromagnetic radiation. It's immediately just destroy the whole calculations. And also the error correction. A single error will just collapse the whole calculation. And the very interesting concept of output observance, which is if you try to find out what is the state of the photons or the electrons, what you have done, you committed in an output observance problem, so it's immediately changed. And it's a good thing and a bad thing. We'll talk about when we talk about cryptography in a second here. So the future of the computing. Everything we're talking about it so far in computers is based on polynomial algebra, which is basically the zeros and ones. It's basically the simple part of the traditional computing, which is math. We're getting to the maximum, or the end of the math. When you go and talk about quantum computing, you're talking about something more faster. You are using physics as the basis for your computation. And that is the basis for quantum computing. The future of computing will depend on the third kind of science, which is biology. We could be using DNA as the basis for our calculation, as an algorithm in the future for cybersecurity or for any kind of calculations. So we are progressing. Boolean algebra used for the math, quantum theory using for the physics using for quantum computing, and within 10, 15 years, we'll be talking about biology as the basis for the computing here. Quickly going through the types of quantum computing to answer the question about why not have a quantum computing available for us. There are actually 4 types. One of them is the quantum emulator simulator. This is available now. It's basically a classical computer, and there is an algorithm there where it's just simulate the calculation. This is how they figure out how many years it's going to take you to calculate something with quantum computing with the classical computer. I use this one in my class for the student when I give them exercises. The quantum annealer, which is one step ahead by having certain number of qubit, and that one is doing a simple calculations. And then we go one step, which is intermediate scale quantum computing. And that's that kind of computer have more qubit. The ultimate goal is to get something called universal quantum computer. And that's the one that we are trying to get. That's what Google is trying to achieve. This is what the big names in the industry trying to get. This is what NASA is trying to do. This is what countries trying to get to the case of the universal quantum computer. Okay, so this is a quick introduction to quantum computing and the good and the bad and the ugly about it. Now let's talk about the quantum cryptography. And quantum cryptography itself, a whole science, it's not new. We heard about it many times. There are actually algorithms available to deal with that. But the quantum cryptography, again, based on physics, quantum computing, physics, quantum, the quantum cryptography. And that will develop some kind of a crypto system secure against being compromised with the knowledge of the sender or receiver. Now, before we go through the details and the technical detail of this, I want you to understand that we have 2 issues with sending messages. And we have 2 options. The one is when you are sending a message over the internet, you are encrypting that one using public key or private key, and the person who has that key can decrypt it. Now, either you encrypt the message using quantum cryptography and then send it, and then they go and then decrypt it, using the keys they have. Or you can do it the easy way, where you say the message will be encrypted with a classical encryption, but the keys that use to decrypt the message, which is the private key and the public key, will be generated by quantum cryptography. And this is what we have now. It's easier to do that using photons, because in this case, regardless if they got the message, it's encrypted, it's going to take them years to decrypt it. The keys are not there, so it's useless for them. The hackers would like to have that, that key, so they can decrypt the message and they get it right away with the mindset about let's use quantum cryptography for the keys for now, because this is the technology we have now, and then maybe later in the future we can have a complete system that will encrypt the keys and the messages at the same time. But this is when we talk about the use of quantum cryptography. Quantum cryptography is based on the use of individual particles wave, which is the photons, because light can be a wave and can't be a particle. That's part of the part of that principle. And then unbreakable crypto system, because it's impossible to measure the quantum state of a system without disrupting the system. This is the key thing. If I encrypt the key, which is I went from the classical zeros and ones, and this is translated into movement of the photons, and they transmit it to the receiver. If anybody tried to intercept this one and look at it, which is what happened with the hackers, they steal it, it's going to change its status. We know exactly that somebody looked at it. And this kind of behavior, it's protecting the quantum cryptography by itself, because by the sheer looking at the photons and looking at the transmission, you change it. This is the observance here problem, and will be a protection for the keys. That's to say, okay, the keys is different. Somebody looked at it. We got a problem. We are compromised. Now, they were a binary, and this is just to show you how it's a binary code comes into play. Each of the photons spins, in one piece of information, zeros and one. And remember, when we talk about quantum computing, we are talking about superposition. So you can send 4 at the same time instead of just 1. You could have it spinning right or left. You can spin this one, horizontally, vertically. All of these things will be translated into photon movement coming from the binary. And this is, at the end, it's going to reverse itself. And this is how you break the code. The regular non-computing encryption can work in many ways, but the message is scrambled and can only be unscrambled using that keys. Now we have control on the keys in the cryptography, in the quantum cryptography. And this is what we are trying to do when we talk about the quantum cryptography at this level. There are some problems with the current systems, the RSA 1024 or 2048, the weak keys, because I'm sure that if you did study about the RSA the RSA encryption, you're going to see that it's a multiplication of 2 huge prime numbers, and you have to factor them to get to the key. So and if the numbers are weak or small or close to each other, then you have a weak protection here. And that's part of this one. And the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, that any adversary cannot look at the photons without changing it. And this is the principle of uncertainty. This is the principle that protected from anybody to watch it until it's reached destination, and then the other photon will start giving you the message, and then you can go and decrypt that part. Now, what kind of challenges facing the quantum cryptography? Number one is technical challenges. Everything I talk about it here, you can do it in the lab. We have to scale it up. It's going to take a lot of time to get there. We are happy to have, companies like Google and IBM and Microsoft and Amazon doing that kind of experiment, give us access to simulators, but it's still, you need a PhD to work in this field. And distance limitations, we get a problem because it's talking about photons, and photons is light, and that's going to have an issue with the with the transmission. Also, we have the issue of direct line of sight between the communication parties. This is another problem. And the cost. So a lot of money associated with that. And interoperability, it means if you look at the D-Wave quantum computing, if you look at the IonQ, if you look at each one of them has its own basis for quantum computing, that will be a different part. And then scalability is a big issue, because If you try to scale it up, now you're dealing with instability because of the noise, because of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. A lot of things will be issued with this. And if you have seen the pictures of those quantum computing, they have to be in a certain temperature. This is one kind of it. And that one is really, one of the fastest one. That's why we use it to, explain or to represent quantum computing. Now, the requirement for the implementation for the quantum cryptography is you have to have the state. Basically, you have to have the photons. Generating one photon is still an issue. You have to generate one photon and program it so it can be received on the other side and the message, and then the message will be read. And the specialized equipment, this is another one. And technical expertise again, and the high bandwidth. This is needed for the transmission, a real-time monitoring. And now this takes us to the concept of the post-quantum cryptography. The beginning of my presentation, I talked about those 4 technologies, the IBAC, I called them, the Internet of Things, the blockchain, and the AI, and the cybersecurity. What happened nowadays? There are a group of bad actors, hackers, countries who, breaches the systems of different countries, and they're holding this information until they get to the level where quantum computing will be available so they can decrypt that data. So it's basically, they have it for post-quantum era where they can read this data because they store it. They breach those systems and they keep it. We're going to get to the point where we don't have to need the private key or the public key. We can use the quantum computing to break all this encryption, and now we can read this data that we stole from those countries or those companies. So post-quantum cryptography, there are 2 kinds of ways for you to deal with it. One of them is the lattice-based cryptography, which is, it's the principle is not new. It's a highly mathematical principle, but you're talking about shortest vector problem. So this is a gridded point in an n-dimensional space, the problem of finding the shortest path. This is how you find that one. And when you talk about n-dimensional, this lattice could have thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions. Now you have the shortest path. That's going to be the way for you to protect yourself against the quantum computing. Or you can use something called code-based cryptography. And this code base, again, it's not new, it's from the 70s. And now it's really becoming up and clear to us that this is really one of the ways that we can use to protect against the quantum cryptography. So the code-based cryptography relies on difficulties of decoding a certain linear error correcting codes. You have the system, there's an error, you correct it, and then you have another system, you correct it. Based on this one, you create something called linear code, and the linear code is very difficult to decrypt, and this is why it's one of the protections against the quantum cryptography. I'm done.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. I learned a lot in this short talk. You really covered the whole area there. I really appreciate it. I'm pretty sure people will have lots of questions later. Allow me to move on to my talk, and then we'll get into question and answer. Yeah. So thanks everyone for your time. Really appreciate for being here. And my talk is about private networks. Let me try to pull up the presentation. Yeah, let me see. I should pull up the right one here. There we go. I think my slides should be visible to you now. And I go in presentation mode. Okay. Thanks everyone for making time once again, and great presentations by Tim and Ahmed before. So I'll talk about the private 5G networks. It took me some time also to think about the title correctly. There are different naming for this. People are calling private networks. There is also, of course, enterprise networks, and in Japan, it's also called local 5G networks. What I'll do with this in this talk is I'll assume that they are all the same. And the essence being that the 5G network that you're using in the wide area network, normal mobile network with your mobile devices, now that 5G network with its changes and and modification can be used in other environment, be it in an office, be it in a factory, be it in a hospital, and things like that. So before I do proceed with my slides, small background. As we move towards the 5G specifications, we did understand that there are new technologies out there. You know, usually 5G standards or telecommunication standards, you have a 10 years cycle, you get a new one, and you know, the beyond 5G, 6G is already under discussion. And at the point you come to the new specification, you look at what technologies are there, what were the issues before, you try to fix those, and what were also left over before you try to bring them in the new generation. So we used to have these box-based solution, closed boxes, and then when we came towards 5G, cloud was already there, a lot of internet-based solutions out there, and we decided that all these should be as part of the 5G network from the very beginning. Yeah. And so let me continue. Let me skip that. So there are actually a few points here mentioning about the differences between the public 5G network and the private 5G network. Couple of points mentioned here. I'll not read them out completely. You're welcome to read them later. But as mentioned, should be mentioned in the left, you'll see the mobile operators deploying the 5G networks, and you are getting a broadband services. When you go towards private 5G, you start fulfilling specific requirements of a given usage. Let's put it that way, given use cases. Yeah, and there you get into many different aspects. So you get into how cost effective it is in the whole lifetime, whether the given requirements of that use case, our use case seems not practical, but to still say a given factory, how that is being fulfilled. Yeah, and be it in security perspective or non-security perspective. Yeah, and mind you, quite a few things come in play, and I think that these things are not mentioned in my slides here. For example, this network that you have, say, completely private network, then it connects to external network. Then how do you secure that? You know, when you have mobile network connecting outside, it's called roaming, yeah, to other network. How you secure that, and how you secure the mobility between the different networks as well. Yeah. So, well, just a few points here about 5G and why it benefits. Yeah. A private network. You know, there is a lot of time sensitivity, for example, and when we specified 5G, we took care of that. We have radio technology, which is quite advanced and going to many different data rates with the same given radio. And that's also the flexibility part comes in place because of the way we have designed it from the very beginning in the 5G specification. The security part as well, when mobile systems at the 3GPP standards body, when we work on any new mobile system, security is there from the very beginning. You know, security by design has been the concept in mobile specifications from step one. I think at least I was active from 3G days. Yeah. And then you have a spectrum which is reliable, and therefore you are much more sure of services being delivered, because availability in many different sense becomes important as you're talking about many different scenarios. Yeah. Let me move ahead, but still, having said that, let's be very practical, as was shown in previous two presentations about the practicality in many different sense. We have to be practical about what we are talking. Just saying that the standards have done their work doesn't mean that the reality and the practical side, everything is fulfilled. Each scenario, each case has their own requirements. There are cases where you are talking about very sensitive data. That's hospital, for example. In that case, how do you take care of data related security? But then there are cases where, say, you have in factory things moving at a very fast pace, and at that time, taking care that human beings do not get hurt it becomes very important. So how do you balance the security over there? So that's a safety incidents mentioned down there. But at the same time, I'll come, I think, to one of my latter slides, is security at different levels and responsibilities of different people and how to take care of that. Yeah. Just a couple of points. When we are talking about these private networks, they can be deployed in many different ways. Yeah. You can have a network that's deployed by a mobile operator, and then that can run a given private network. Yeah. And then talk about the security over there is of course, that word trust doesn't work very well with me because I cannot really measure it properly. But how do you then secure the data going over a different network? Yeah? How do you how you're sure that your network, private network, is completely, let's say, fine, reliable, and as you need it as per your security requirements and regulatory security requirements? How is that being fulfilled while a third party is maintaining it and running it? Yeah, what availability fulfillment you get from there? Yeah, but that's one way. The other way would be that you do partially. The part of the network is by mobile network, and part of the network is being run by the say example factory owner. That's also possible. And then you're maintaining parts of it. Here, for example, for the case of confidentiality integrity, that's given. You have the UPF, user plane function, and the processing of your data under your control inside the factory. The issue now is also that you have to be very practical in the sense that how are you doing identity access management over there? Yeah. Do you have the proper ways for that? How are you in the first case as well, in the second as well, segregating between the different layers of the OT and the IT part and the IoT devices as well, and taking care of security properly? And then last but not least, how are you really managing the network? Yeah. Are you able to do that? And then last one is, of course, you could have total control. You could do that by sharing with a mobile operator. Cloud allows that multi-tenancy, but at the same time, you could have it all by your own. And how do you do control this network privately completely by yourself? Yeah. And then the security requirements are different in that case. Yeah. But in every single case, if you're talking about and you are talking about an OT environment where the Purdue model comes in place, at which level, how you mix the connectivity and how you differentiate and segregate different parts and still allow good communication will come in place. I'll continue further, and given the time, I will not spend too much over here, but just a few points. I haven't even mentioned the protocol layers here, but you will have to take care of physical security, and then after that, any box, you will come up with the hardware security aspect, the virtualization aspects, the 3GPP security, the specifications related security, and how that happens. Endpoint security will also become extremely important, applications as well. And behind all of this is, of course, how you are doing the authentication, which is related to a given identity, and how are you managing that? Yeah. There's a lot behind it. How you're taking care of in 3GPP, for example, the privacy aspects that is defined by the standards. And on the other side, who is maintaining what and has what responsibility? Yeah, infrastructure provider, private 5G provider, or user. So going towards the end, I mean, I have put Industry 5.0. That's what we are saying in Japan, going beyond 4.0. 5G does help fulfill those needs, and we do have to take care of different requirements coming from different industries in terms of security, especially, and fulfill them adequately. Yeah, and at the same time, one has to take care what regulatory requirements comes in place, and does it apply to the one running the network privately? Because mobile networks have quite a few regulatory requirements, including lawful interception. That's just an example there. And then the data side as well, very strict requirement on privacy, what data should be kept, maintained, and things like that. Yeah. So with that, I conclude my talk, and we can go into Q&A session. I'll stop sharing my presentation here. And so Tim, Ahmed, I think we can go into Q&A. Just one point before I get into that is that I really want to thank all the people. We received quite a few questions actually. And what we'll try to respond to some of them, and others we will probably take it offline and post it somehow. So, let me do this. I'll pull up a few questions, and since Tim was the first one speaking and has been quite a bit actually quiet for quite some time, so let me shoot at you, Tim. So, Tim, the points you mentioned from passkey aspects and going all the way to AI, completely important in day-to-day life. I've been seeing network security issues because people are accessing in a wrong way. I want to mix a couple of points together in this asking you. When do you see, in general, all these points that you mentioned becoming mainstream? Yeah, and how some aspect on it, especially when you talk about the attack path simulation, on how does it benefits our vulnerability management? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start on the attack path simulation one, because that's an easier one to answer. So I think that if we look at vulnerability management, it very much looks at individual devices. It doesn't look at the holistic, it looks at the holistic network, but it doesn't connect the dots based on the challenges or the difficulty of exploiting certain vulnerabilities. So it does, but it looks at it per individual. So attack path simulation, it just connects the dots together and it gives you a path. Will vulnerability management probably come out with attack path simulation? I suspect it will, right? Once somebody comes out with something, everybody else adds on to it. It's kind of like zero trust. So I think we'll just see attack path simulation being the next step of vulnerability management, if that makes sense. The second component of your question is where does this technology, most of it's actually available today. Now, the good question is, when is it going to be prevalent? Attack path simulation's there, but most people probably haven't seen it or heard it too much. The next generation SIMs, that is actually probably the closest to us at the moment, because people are moving to cloud. They don't have enough, the current SIMs aren't supporting the amount of telemetry that they require. So now those questions are coming up going, hey, I have all this telemetry, how do I do it? And this is where, the next generation SIMs discussions coming out. So AI obviously is upon us, but I think everybody's rushing first. So typically, like most of the industry, we're gonna run with the hype, and then we'll find the vulnerabilities, and then people's going to go back and secure it. So I think overall passkeys themselves are going to be pretty fast. I know Google's already implemented them on all our applications, on our consumer-based applications, and I think we'll start seeing that more and more. Obviously, customers are very cautious about what they do for their IDP and how they use passkeys, but I'm hopeful that we'll see that coming faster than sooner, because the most concerning to me is the quantitative computing, and I think that to me is the scary aspect, because it completely just shifts us up. So some people ask what it's going to look like 10 years from now. I don't even know what it's going to look like 6 months from now, to be frank.
Thanks, team. I think we received some other questions in similar lines, but instead of diving deeper there, let me go to Ahmed. I want to manage the time also a little bit. Let me go to Ahmed. We received a question on quantum computing. You covered a bit of it, but still asking you. Actually, I have seen quite a few people talking about quantum computing and how we can really use it. And is it really practical when it becomes practical? And I'll just read a last bit of the question from this person. How the quantum bits can be generated, what are the advantages of quantum computing over state-of-the-art technologies, and probably I'll add to it, and how do you see the security aspect to it? You have covered that quite a bit in your presentation, but still appreciate your response to it.
Well, okay, generating the QA-bit and things that we covered that one using the photons and the superposition and entanglement. The question about the application of the quantum computing, the main thing about the quantum computing now or computers is optimization. many of the companies, what they do, they use it for dealing with the problem of optimization for of a code, of the design of new drug, for example, air traffic, weather, models. So because all of these kind of data, they need a huge power. And you can do it with classical computer, you can do it with supercomputers, but the power that you are consuming and the time you're consuming, it's going to be reduced, to minimum when you are using the quantum computing. Back again to the same example of the maze I give it to you guys, when you can open all the doors at the same time. This is the same thing. You're running the machine on all cylinders, and you can get this one right away. So the practical application for quantum computing, as we talk about it now, is not the quantum internet, despite the fact we have some practical and working model of it. There is one in China, one here in the United States. The Department of Energy, they have close to $1 billion just for this, for the quantum internet. And it's open for every school, every university, every research that anybody want to go through that. All the quantum teleportation, which is we see it in Star Trek, where you can move objects from one place to the other by just some kind of some kind of a system where you disappear here, you appear there. They prove this one just not for the human, for objects. That's what they prove it for, and that's the future. But nowadays is, if we are trying to generate a new drug and would like to run all the possible applications, all the possible side effects, do the possible combinations of the biology of that medications, this can be run and so fast with quantum computing. Back to the first thing we talk about, if you guys remember, when we talk about quantum computing, talk about speed. So if you have this in mind, that's gonna just answer all the questions about where and how and when you can use quantum computing.
Anand, if I could interrupt real quick, it's Brent. There are some, can you see the Q&A?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, great. I just want to make sure, I would like to see if you guys can answer those questions specifically. And I do want to say to Akiko, Dimitri, and Hamza, thank you very much. And I will be contacting you all by email. And some free books from River Publishers are on your way. Okay. So, but I'll contact you all to let you know and, ask you which books you prefer. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming. I'll back to you, Anand.
Okay. Thanks, Brent. I think we'll spend another 10 minutes and then probably we'll close the webinar today. But appreciate that. I think we are answering the questions here as well, kind of while covering from the older list. But let me with that pointer from Brent, since we are talking to Ahmed now, let me take the last bit first. It's coming from Dmitry Zotikov, yeah, and he has 2 points actually there about observance problem and it impacts instead of reading the whole thing out. And the second point he has, to better understand the future of computing, does neural networks from deep learning is close to biology-based computing. So Ahmed and Tim, if you want to add as well. Yeah, but passing to Ahmed first.
Okay, so the observance problem or the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, it's not going to impact the people who generate it, because the generation is done through two steps. First one, you generate it with the classical computers, and that translates into the photons. So you're not monitoring the photons itself. The thing about it is, when you are transmitting this kind of information, this is where the interception, trying to figure out what is kind of signal you are sending, this is where you lose it. It's like you have a lake and somebody, and it's very calm, and you touch it, you're going to see all those ripples. That's going to disrupt the whole process. So that's to answer the first question. The second part is talking about the 3 steps I talk about it, where the Boolean algebra, which is the math, is the basis for all the computers we are doing now. We are approaching the maximum, we are approaching the limits of the math, because you look at the zeros and ones, look, everything is based on math. We're done with math. What is the next science we should use? When we talk about physics, we're talking about quantum computing. That's why quantum computing is really interesting, because now we are dealing with the physics, which is the applications of math. Now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, physics will reach its limits. We're going to get to the point where we need something faster. Biology, it's the candidates, not chemistry. Chemistry has a different story. There's a lot of things associated with chemistry. But biology, I mean, there are some research, there are some papers about using the DNA as the basis for the algorithm. The human body is the most complicated machine ever created. So when we talk about using some of the creativity and some of the complex system we have inside us as as a biology there, and try to translate that and use it in computing, that's going to make it even more powerful than the case of quantum computing. In your mind and my mind, I understand this is going through the progress of the movies, the sci-fi movies, when you have the mix of the human and the machines. That's exactly what we talk about when we talk about the biology, how they use the biology as the basis for the computing.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Let me go to the first question actually that was placed to us. It was by Hamza Romani, and this is to Tim regarding passkey. And the question is, I understand each account or device would have a key pair, but since no certificates are involved, how is authentication established when the public key is first created?
So it's built out of the browser. So there actually are certificates, and they're stored on the browser and on the actual application and website. So that's I think the advantage, is because there's not just one certificate. It's not just setting on the browser, it's setting on both sides, right? The public key is obviously, the private key is clearly setting in the browser. And then of course that gets shared and the public key gets created on the actual application, but they're unique to both sides of the house. So it's not significantly different than the traditional certificate sharing that we've seen in the past, except for it's actually stored on both sides of the house. And of course, those keys have to come together for the authentication.
So let me do one thing. I'll take one last question, and then we can go towards closing this session. And again, it's coming from Dimitri. He has a couple of points there, but I'll take only the first one. Is it in general more secure to rely on external cloud providers for protection of your data, as they have to provide high level of assurance to customers rather than trying to invest internally in it, people, process, tech, etc.? Tim, you first. Maybe Ahmed has his opinion as well.
Well, I think with the cloud side of it is the cloud providers are out there are spending billions and billions on securing that critical infrastructure, and that is the advantage versus doing it yourself. I think it can be done on both sides, but the question is, does the company have the resources, like the people, and do they have the amount of money that they want to invest in it? And I think that's been a challenge, right? It's not that it can't be done, but cloud actually is providing that capability that usually would be out of the reach for most companies that are out there today. So, and then the speed and the capability, the tools that are there, they're all integrated. They're all there together as one, instead of actually have to go and procure different tools, for different use cases. So I think ultimately we have we both succeed or fail in the cloud by the security of the cloud. So there's a vested interest by the cloud providers to ensure that they're secure. They're secure.
Thanks, Tim. Ahmed, would you like to add anything to that?
I think he did a wonderful job, Tim. You're the man.
Let me still shoot one last question and then close it, because this is a slightly different topic. And I think there's a question that we received earlier from someone, and we can discuss that and then go towards the conclusion. It's about blockchain. So the question is blockchain the solution to modern security breaches? I pass to Ahmed first.
Well, you have to understand blockchain. What's exactly blockchain? As a system where you have copies of the same information encrypted on multiple nodes, multiple computers. So, and they sync together with something called gossip protocol. Now, when you talk about the security, I mean, the simplest definition for blockchain is cryptography and human logic. The cryptography is the username, password, and everything we talk about it. The human logic is what we talk about it of saying that if somebody tried to modify one node, the syncing protocol will discover it and kick it out. If somebody tried to censorship, 20, 30 computers out of the network, which is scattered all over the place, then that's gonna make it, they're gonna isolate it. When I teach that class of blockchain, I remember when I first started in 2018, I tell them that the key thing is to make it hard for the hackers, for the bad guys to change the data. It's not impossible, because if you have 51% of the nodes, if you control 50%, 51% of the computer, you can change the system and make it so hard that it's not worth it. Whether it is money, time, power. You say, I give them example, if somebody would like to rob the bank and they go to the bank and then say that there are snipers at the top of the bank and there's police station around it, you still can do it, but what's gonna happen? You might lose your life. You might, injured because of that. And that's the same example for the blockchain. Now the question is, can we use the blockchain for every security scenarios? The answer is no, because there are situations where the blockchain is too expensive to use, because you need to have the program, you need to have the setup, you have to have the expertise. If the purpose of your data can be fulfilled by the traditional databases, just go for it. Don't waste your time with the blockchain. You just make sure that you have everything up to date, protect yourself, with the latest technology. But when it get to the point where this data is so valuable that you want to make sure it's protected and you have the budget, and I'm talking about companies that they can spend the money to create their own private blockchain. We're talking about one of the types of the blockchain, then it's worth it in this case. And this is the difference, between using it or not using it. And there was a question about, can it replace SQL? It cannot replace it. They can live together, so it depends on who's going to use it.
Thanks, Ahmed. Tim, if you want to add something to that.
It's hard to fill into that. Everything 1000% agree with there. Obviously it's decentralized and transparency and tamper protection. It's certainly, I think, a tool that we have, but it's not a silver bullet. I wish it was. There's definitely use cases for it, but it's not designed to present some of the attacks. So like we have social engineering attacks and phishing and stuff like that. So I think in particular use cases where, exactly as Ahmed had mentioned, if you have the budget and the resources to be able to support it, clearly, if you wanted to encrypt and you want to make sure that particular data is not going to be modified, then great, it's a perfect use case. But I think it's just a tool to add to our arsenal, but I don't think it's going to solve everything for us.
Thanks very much, Tim. With that, allow me to start closing the webinar. I just want to thank Tim and Ahmed first, so claps, guys. So thank you very much for being here and doing a great job. Thanks everyone for participating, and everyone who will be viewing this session. I think we had a great discussion on quite a few topics on cloud-related, complete coverage of quantum computing, and then a local or private 5G aspects, and finally the blockchain also. And we look forward to further such sessions with everyone. Thanks, everyone. Great to have you together. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.